Morning. First order of business is the approval of the minutes, which were circulated in advance. Any amendments or changes to the minutes?
No.
Well
Seeing
done.
none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. We have to vote. Ms. Jazinski,
Aye.
Mr. Malinowski,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. The minutes are approved. Moving to item 3 on our agenda, chair's report, very brief. As Ms. Hale had mentioned previously, she's been trying to schedule Town Labor Council to join us for a meeting, and she has accomplished that. Ms. Federoff will be joining us for our next meeting on February 16th. I would ask, if you think of it, to send me any, Ms. Hale.
I just wanted to make an amendment to that. It's actually the March 9th meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
March 9th meeting. All the more reason, if you have any thoughts on questions you'd like to put forth to Ms. Federoff, if you could send me an email. You certainly be free at the meeting to ask any questions you want. But I thought if we could get some questions in advance and maybe have some structure to the dialogue, that might help. I would plan on asking her about MIPA and how we sort of proceed. That's been an open item since we received the analysis from prior Labor Council. I also have some questions about the interaction of, since we're adding a new position to the SAP from the Board of Health, the interaction between the Board of Health statute and Chapter 41, just by way of example. Nothing else there. We'll move on to number 4, old business, SAP revisions. So because of Mr. Nixon's absence, we will not be able to take up item 4A since Mr. Malinowski would be recusing himself. That would only leave 2 of us, and I've advised Ms. Malinowski that we would be putting this off until our March meeting. If it becomes the case that we need to finalize our changes to the SAP prior to that, then we may have to schedule another meeting, because we certainly want to make sure the position gets added. I hope that's not the case, but obviously we can't deal with that today. Moving on to next item, Recreation Department. Is Mr. Davis on? Can you bring him in?
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Davis. We've all seen the material you put together for our package. Anything you want to add to that?
No, pretty self-explanatory. Again, we're just looking to address grade 1 of our schedule. We are looking to start hiring our part-time summer staff probably within the next month. So we're hopeful to get this up to kind of the state minimum so we can hire appropriately. And again, as I mentioned, be competitive with our towns around us.
So since Tim sent these documents to me, he and I have had a dialogue. As I mentioned to him, we're going to be looking at updating the salary schedules starting soon. And I expressed a reluctance to modify any schedule sort of by itself without relevance to the other schedules in the SAP, particularly when Schedule F is a mirror image of Schedule C. And the change F obviously would put it out of alignment with that. However, he definitely has an issue that needs to be addressed. So I had a way of trying to solve his problem without having to change the salary schedules. And that would be this. So two-step process. First of all, I would suggest, since we already are considering, well, I think we already voted to update Schedule C by 3%, just as we are for Schedule A, we would, by necessity, I think, update Schedule F by 3%, so it remains a mirror image of Schedule C. We could then authorize Mr. Davis to hire new counselors at a rate equivalent to the minimum wage, which in 2022 is $14.25. And as he explained to me, he has returning counselors who he pays at a somewhat higher rate than new counselors. And with the 3% addition to Schedule C, to Schedule F, that would bring the top rate there to $15 an hour. We could authorize Mr. Davis to hire experienced counselors at a rate up to $15 an hour. And Mr. Davis opined to me that that would be satisfactory to allow him to hire the people that he needed. So again, that's just my suggested proposal, but I would open it up to the board for your feelings, either in changing the salary schedule, doing what I've suggested, or some third alternative, or doing nothing, whatever the board deems appropriate.
I agree with your assessment of the changing the charts, the salaries, but I like your compromise in order to get the recreation department what they need to start hiring employees. So I would agree with the changes you've just suggested. The $15 an hour for an experienced counselor, and then less experience at the state minimum wage of 14 and a quarter. Was it 14.25? 14.25.
14.25. Mr. Malinowski?
So I think we absolutely have to do something. And if that would achieve Tim's objectives while not causing a complete rework of Schedule C, I would be supportive of your methodology. Just add two comments. One, I think I said this at the last meeting, this isn't specific to recreation. I know we follow the federal minimum wage, but I have a really tough time, especially now, paying below state minimum wage for any position, period. So whether it be, so I would ask that we consider something with Schedule C to get that close, that those, especially those two lower grades, closer, if not equal to state minimum wage. But I'll leave that off to the side for a second because this is specific to Tim. And then I would just say, I hadn't really looked at this, Tim, before, to be completely honest. I mean, way back when I was a teenager, I was a camp counselor. I started in a municipality. I was candidly making the amount of money you're paying right now. It was, again, in a municipality a long time ago. I have gray hair to show for it. So I don't think you're asking for anything that's unreasonable either. In minimum wage, I believe back in those days was about $8 an hour. So I think you pay for what you get for. I firmly believe that. So I think if this is going to allow you to attract better talent to your program and retain better talent, I am fully supportive of it. And I would assume, while it's outside the purview of this committee, you and your commission have done a great job of rejiggering the finances around this to obviously make sure that the tuition payments, will compensate the town accordingly for this.
Okay, thank you. So I think I'll make two motions. The first is.
Barry, before you do that, before you make a motion, I'm sorry. I'm looking at Schedule C and the lowest we pay is $11.44. So we are above, or no, $11.44. So it should be what, 14 and a quarter. So we're a little bit behind.
Yeah, we're
okay. So we do need to correct that sooner.
Yeah, and we will get to that issue later in the program.
Okay, so I agree with Jason on that. So
Okay.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No problem. So the first motion would be to adjust Schedule F to increase it by 3%, consistent with what we have done for Schedule A and Schedule C. Is there a second?
So moved, and Jason
So
second.
second,
Okay, we have a roll call vote. Ms. Jasinski,
Aye.
Mr. Malinowski,
aye.
and the chair votes aye, so that's approved. The second, I would move to authorize Mr. Davis and the Recreation Department to pay camp counselors a minimum of $14.25 and up to $15 an hour in calendar year 2022.
Second.
Okay, take a roll call vote. Ms. Jasinski,
Aye.
Mr. Malinowski,
Aye.
chair votes aye. That's approved. Hopefully that solves your problem, Tim.
It does. Thank you very, very much.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Okay, moving on to the next item, benefits. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Malinowski.
So first I will start with, I think everyone knows the background of this, but a big thank you to Mr. Jasinski. Basically, we asked Ms. Hale for the comparable communities, and basically Dorian and I had a lot of reading to do of many communities. We basically split the list in half of trying to just gather what other communities do on a whole slew of things related to Section 11 of the SAP, using Southborough as the baseline. We literally filled out a spreadsheet, so I have no idea what Dorian's thoughts are on this. So maybe what I'll do is I'll share what I read and what my thoughts are in a proposed path, and obviously then see where she's at, having read similar data but for different towns. But there's clearly no one size fits all on like our version of Section 11 in every other town. Some do it via policy, some do it through full, personnel plans like we have. Some towns, ironically, separate benefits. Some department heads have one chart, and some non-department heads have another chart. It tends to be the department heads accrue vacation earlier in their tenure because they're probably coming in with some experience level, which I think is what we try to achieve through our exemption, that someone can come to the personnel board for 3 weeks when they start, unless they're obviously on a contract, they're dealing with the appointing authority there. But the way I would boil this down is I think we've been very fair to Southborough employees based on what I see in here. Ironically, we do have, in my opinion, some significant differences between SAP employees, department heads, in unions at this point. I have no idea, and I'm speaking to the town unions, not the school union, because that was not part of anything we looked at. But I would think that there are some changes that we need to explore, because I think we are, outside of the norm. Some will be, in my opinion, favorable to our employees, and some may be met with some resistance. So I would caution that any changes we make should be done with care, some sort of phasing, and with justification in facts behind them, not just arbitrarily done. And that if we have any views of where we're headed today, just amongst us three, and I realize we'll have to get Mr. Nixon's feedback, we should have some sort of feedback period where employees could provide comment to us before actually voting any change official in this SAP or a future SAP. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay. So now I think everyone has the spreadsheet. I would normally ask someone like Vanessa to bring it up, but there's a lot in there. So what I just wanted to go through is some themes by question. The first was vacation accrual rate. I think we're being very fair to our employees. There was nothing that stood out to me that said we were behind anyone. I do think this is one of the opportunities, as I mentioned in prior meetings, that we can potentially enhance benefits with no cost to the town, because most of these positions aren't backfilled when someone takes a vacation. It's just productivity, I think. Where we could be more competitive by offering more vacation upfront, especially seeing as, at least recently, we seem to be finding experienced candidates for some of the roles, even if they're not roles that necessarily always require experience. So I would ask that the personnel board consider whether we be more aggressive earlier in someone's tenure with the town related to their vacation accrual rates. The second item of study was the amount of vacation that can carry over to the next year. This was originally what flagged some of the discussion on advisory last year around this, is we tend to be on the higher side of what someone can carry year to year. So in the case of someone that can accrue 5 weeks a year, they can actually carry up to 10 weeks at one time, but they need to use that first year's vacation but before you go into year 3. So it's kind of like a FIFO approach from an accounting perspective. So what I would recommend we consider is that we limit the amount of vacation that can carry from year to year, but also in congruence with that, consider awarding vacation up front in the year, changing everyone to a July 1st award date. We can talk about how that would play in with the anniversaries, because, to make that favorable, but really use vacation in a way that I believe was intended, in that you give vacation to someone to avoid burnout and to allow them to recharge outside of the workplace. And I realize why people carry vacation, but I would think that compromise would hopefully allow people to have it up front. That's what we do with some of our department heads, namely Mr. Purple, I know, is in his contract. He gets 4 weeks on July 1st, and he has the whole year to use it. He has a provision, I believe, for a week of carryover, Mark, if I've got that right. So
yeah, up to 5 days.
Yeah. So I would ask that we consider something like that, because and phase it in over time. Because as you remember, Attorney Fedorov, we'd have to let someone use what they currently have. That's an accrued benefit. We can't take it away. So would recommend that if we were to go that route and study that route, that would be put into the SAP this year to give people notice, but not effective until July 1 of 2023. So it would give someone probably somewhere between 12 to 18 months notice, probably 12 to 15 months notice of when it would be effective. That would allow us to work through that. So that's that piece.
Can you just
Sure.
explain this? So how much would an employee be able to carry over to the following year?
I think it's subject to discussion. Most
Okay.
towns were 5 to 10 days max. Some towns, I believe it was Sudbury, nothing. You really you have to go to like the select board or the town administrator and improve your case. I'm not there that we should do that. My recommendation would be 5 or 10 days. I could go either way. Which in the case of the employee that has 5 weeks of vacation, which we have a bunch, instead of them carrying 10 at any one point in time, they really never would have more than 7. And it would skinny down kind of, an ability to work the system in more just use vacation the way it's supposed to be used.
Okay.
Sick day accrual, we're at the top end, 15 days per year. I'm not recommending necessarily a change there, but just to make the board aware that some towns are as low as 6 and as high as 15 like we are. Again, just a data point, because it plays into where I'm going to go next, which is the max amount of sick leave to accrue. We have a clause for employees prior to 7/1, that they were hired prior to 7/1 of 07, that they're allowed to accrue unlimited sick time. And then after that, we capped it at 120 days. But at retirement, again, the key is retirement. It's not if someone leaves, but at retirement, we do pay 20% of their balance that, out, which can be a significant number. I know there was one in particular in the last 3 or 4 years that pretty much emptied our fund for sick and vacation payouts. And I believe there's an article this year to replenish that fund. It may have been replenished once more in between. But just to give you a range, you can probably see it on the data that was collected. Most towns do not do a payout at all of sick leave, or if they do, they cap it. Some of the caps were 2,500, 3,000, 7,500, and they also cap the amount of sick time that you can accrue, which I think we've done as a town, but still 120 days is on the higher end. So what I would recommend we start to look at here is whether we cap a payout, or whether we consider eliminating it. Again, this is not necessarily a protected benefit. I'm more in the camp personally of a cap, to this benefit, as opposed to trying to do it any other way. I would say at a bare minimum, we need to put language in the SAP this year for any new hires after 7/1 of 2022, that there will be no payout period. Right. So then it's really what's going to be fair to our existing employees. In what do we want to do there? Again, my belief is sick time is meant to be there as candidly an insurance policy. If someone were to unfortunately get sick and need extended periods of time, and would ask that as part of this, we consider potentially a sick leave bank, which has already been established for some of our unions in town, and consider whether that's another avenue we can go here. That will take longer, I think, and it's not something we could do immediately, but was something that was very prevalent in a lot of other towns. Again, to create insurance for your fellow employees. If you may be the one that's sick now, but it's going to be someone else down the road. Really meant to use sick time the way it's supposed to be used, as opposed to as a monetary component. On the flip side, I also think there was some unique wording that at least I saw in terms of incentivizing people that aren't using sick time in terms of personal days. And I believe the DPW actually already has this in our town in their union contract. If you don't call out sick for a certain period of time, you get an extra personal day. Again, personal days don't cost us money, and they incentivize good behavior. So again, something we can look at to balance some of this stuff out. But those were my thoughts. I just think there's some right sizing that needs to be done. I'm also cautious that we're in a CBA year for all the unions, and surprise, surprise, none of our union contracts read the same. On some of these sections, everyone has their uniqueness due to each group, and none of them all tied. There's definitely a lot of similarities, but even if you go read our department head contracts, again, not all the same language. Some reference directly right into the SAP. I think Mr. Ballantyne and Mr. Savelli's are really good examples of that. Some hit the SAP and then leave the SAP. I think that's a good example of Mark and the Chiefs, and to some extent, Ms. Galligan. So with any of this, and I realize it's outside of the purview of the personnel board, anything we can do to equalize it and make sure that we are, not favoring one group over another, and standardize it. Again, that's going to be the most difficult part of this, but that's kind of where I'm at. So I think I should pause. In Dorian, I don't know what you gleaned from it, but that was my personal opinion that I walked away with.
I think you've just said it all, so I don't think I need to add anything. My concern, and looking at the accrual of sick time and the payout on the sick time. Sick time is meant to be there for you to use, the employees to use if they were to get sick. It wasn't meant as a huge payout at the end of your employment. So I think we need to tighten that one up. And then same thing with the vacation. Vacation's there for you to get a break, to get your thoughts back together, to get a rest and get back into your job and be able to give 100%. And you should be using it. And so I'm not sure the correct way. I know how corporate world does it, but that's not the same here. So I think we have a lot of work to do on this. And Jason, thank you for spearheading this because you've done a great job with it. So I appreciate your help with it.
Yes, thank you, Jason, and thank you, Dory, and both of you for spending the time and putting the energy into putting all of this in a somewhat understandable form so you can actually glean the information that's relevant without having to pour through pages and pages and pages of documents. So very helpful. A couple of general thoughts. The first one is a timing issue because I agree with you, Jason, that if we're going to do something either positive or negative, we should give employees some opportunity for input. And it seems to me that, particularly without having Dave here now, we're not in a position, and we probably need to all think about this more, about what direction we want to go. And so maybe that's something we address at the February meeting. And then is there enough time to have some kind of forum, whether it's just putting information out there and inviting employees to attend our meeting where this is going to be discussed, or having a separate forum of some kind? I think we're going to be very tight in terms of getting everything accomplished in time to get it in the warrant for the upcoming town meeting. So that's point number one. Secondly, my feeling on vacations, twofold. One, I agree there needs to be some accrual allowed, just because there may be a year where, because of the stress of the job, an employee had intended to take vacation, emergency comes up, they're not able to do it, and they shouldn't be penalized by losing vacation for that. 5 weeks for someone with 5 weeks is probably too much, so we can talk about where that comes out. I'm a little less, I guess, supportive of doing anything at the starting levels for the reason that what we try to do on the compensation side is not be the highest paying community like us, but to be sort of slightly above the midpoint. I think that's what we shoot for. And looking at that, if we were to eliminate, and I'm not saying you suggested this, Jason, but just saying if we were to say, well, we're going to eliminate 2 weeks and start everyone at 3, that looks to me like it puts us well above what everyone else is doing. So and obviously that has a domino effect, because if you raise that to 3, then you've got to raise the others as well. So I'd have some hesitation about that. But those are, and I certainly, as I think I've said before, am generally in favor of not allowing people to be paid out any sick leave at the termination of their employment. I think it's worth considering incentivizing people by rewarding them with a personal day if they don't use sick leave in a particular year. I think that makes some sense to me, but I certainly would be in favor of uh, definitely for people who hired from this point on, not allowing them to receive any compensation for unused sick leave at termination of their employment. So those are just a few of my sort of general thoughts about where we go from here. So I guess that is the next question. What is the best way forward? Do we want to put together some specific proposals for consideration as a first step at our next meeting? Or do we want to leave it open and have a more general discussion at our next meeting when Dave is with us?
I have some thoughts, but I saw Mark. I don't know if you saw Mark had his hand up and he took it down. So I don't know if Mark had something he wanted to weigh in on before I answer your question.
Yeah, no, just before we get away from the comments that the chair had just made, I just wanted to point out to the comment regarding, you know, some level of carryover accrual for vacation, because, you know, these type of emergency situations come up where people may not be able to use them. You already do have something in section 11 that addresses that ability to pay out an employee up to 10 days a year if those situations arise based on, you know, the department head. It's in section 11B. I believe it's section 4, subsection 4. So there is something that does exist that gives you the ability to pay out for vacation in those extraordinary, you know, work-related circumstances. It may not fully address the issue, but it at least it touches on what you mentioned. So I at least want to make sure you were aware of that.
Yep, thank you. Thank you. Jason, you were gonna.
So I wouldn't, given that this issue has been out there for a year and a half, and I'm not comfortable doing nothing anymore, because every year that passes is candidly a missed opportunity to kind of do what's fair to both employees and taxpayers. And what I would suggest we do, and I don't want to make any decisions without Dave, because I think we need to all four of us vote, is one of us develop a survey, a pretty open-ended survey with some broad questions related to some of these things, and see where the employees' minds are at. I don't know if we can, do we have the ability in a public record setting, Mark, to do an anonymous survey, i.e. we could send it but not collect who's submitting it?
Yes.
So then we would, obviously the comments would become a public record, but we wouldn't know who wrote them unless they actually wrote their name or their department or title, etc. So what I would suggest between now and then is just developing a very brief survey, just saying the personnel board is considering changes to section 11, specifically related to vacation accrual, i.e. get it up front and use it during the year with some sort of carryover period, and or the sick leave policy, you know, and just let people write their thoughts. They could say this is not the brightest idea. They could say this is the brightest idea. And then I think it'll give us a gauge, at least, for where we're headed. I don't know that it has to be the answer, but at least it will show us for our deliberation at the next meeting, you know, what that sentiment is, so that we can then propose language. And I realize that we won't have this will probably take 2 town meetings to fully implement, but I think there are some easier stop gaps that we can do now. That would be what I would propose we do between now and February.
And are you thinking of open-ended questions in the survey rather than this is what we're thinking of? What do you think?
Yeah, I think like an example of a question that I could foresee based on what we've done to date is what are your feelings of getting your vacation accrual on July 1st of every year and knowing that no more than 10 days would carry over into a future fiscal year? what are your thoughts with no more than 5 days carrying to the next year? And just see what the reaction is, right? And I don't know what the reaction is going to be. I think you're probably going to get a mix in that question. And just see what people think. Those would be the type of questions I would ask. I don't know what I would ask on the sick leave yet, to be honest with you, because I can't see that one's going to be as favorable of a response.
I wouldn't think so. I'm just wondering if you don't know, and certainly should be anonymous, but if you don't know how much experience an employee has. So you say you can accrue up to 10 days. So someone who has 5 weeks vacation may view that very differently from someone who has 2 weeks vacation. And if you don't know how much experience the person who's answering it has, you don't know. I don't know if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, you could put a question in there is, what is your current vacation accrual rate? 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. Obviously, the 6 weeks, we're probably going to know the 3 people that have that, or 4 people, whatever it is. But everyone else in there, I think you've got enough of a data set that, I mean, no one has to fill it out too, but I think I would also encourage, as part of any survey, if someone doesn't feel comfortable filling out the survey, but wants to have an offline conversation with any one of us to bring their feedback back in a confidential setting, I think that's also what we're here for, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've been on this board the least amount of time. I've gotten calls from employees with just random questions, comments for us to consider. And I think that's a healthy dialogue. At no point in time did I say, this employee called me, right? It's just, and sometimes it's just a sanity check. So I think there's a lot of options we can put out there to make the employees feel included in this, but I think there's also a lot of data out there to help them understand why we candidly have a responsibility to look at this.
Okay. I have an open meeting question. So how could we do that in a timely fashion so we'd have the data available, say, for the next meeting? And maybe that's not possible, but unless we sort of would delegate the whole process to 2 members of the board, right?
I always err on one member. I know you all have said, but that's a personal view. You can't get in trouble with one, but I think one member with a member of the town staff, let the personnel director figure out who he would like that to be. I would think that would be how we go about gathering an initial set. And then I think if the membership doesn't think that the survey got them enough data, then we can still ask for more data at the next meeting. It just may be at risk of not doing anything for this town meeting, which is fine, but I think it's worth a shot without obviously tripping open meeting law.
Okay. Dorianne, any thoughts?
I just think it's just going to be a difficult conversation with both the categories, the vacation and the sick time accrual. I feel bad that we're even having to do this, but again, I agree with Jason. We're looking at the other towns and what everybody else is doing, and we do have a responsibility to the taxpayers and to the employees. So we're kind of I think this is just very difficult because I actually feel bad, but we have to do the right thing. And I do believe that to get the employees' input on this is critical. We need to hear what they have to say about it. If we wanted to get this done for this year, Mark, what is the closing of the warrant, or do we not know yet because we don't have a town meeting date?
Well, the warrant is closed right now in terms
Oh,
of
it is.
more potential articles, but obviously the SAP is an annual article.
Okay.
It's just a matter of filling in the details. I mean, the town meeting date is still up in the air. I would say that you've got another month. By the beginning of March, first, second week of March, you really need to have everything done. And because I'm assuming that we could have a town meeting as early as the end of April, we could have, the selectmen will be talking about this again on Tuesday. I think May 7th and May 21st are the dates that are likeliest to be considered if we continue to look at an outdoor town meeting. COVID numbers are going in the right direction. Does that change the thought? Board of Health will have to weigh in again. It's still very much up in the air. So at this point, knowing what we know and where we're potentially at, I would say first, second week of March, you really have to have everything finalized as to what you want to do for the warrant.
Okay, thank you.
So we have a meeting obviously on February 16th. We could squeeze in another meeting if we had to between then and the March 9th meeting so that we'd be in a position to finalize something no later than the March 9th meeting. Because I'm thinking if we do a survey and it just focuses on the vacation piece of it, and then we decide to do something, and I think I won't say anything we do on sick leave is going to be seen as a negative, because it may be some people will see if we decide to reward people with a personal day, employees may see that as a positive. But I wouldn't want it to appear like we asked for their opinion on the vacation side, on the plus side, and then took something away on the sick leave side, sort of without input from employees. So I think we just have to factor that in the timing of it, how we'd handle that as well. But having said that, since Jason has so generously volunteered his time to put this survey together, I'd be supportive of him doing that. If he's willing to do it, I don't mean to, but I just think you're ideally suited, having spent as much time as anyone on thinking about the issues and looking at the relevant documents, if you're willing to do it.
I'd be happy to if that's the will of you and Dorian.
Dorian?
Fine with me?
Okay, it is our will.
So Mark, who am I going to work with? You don't have to answer this now, but I would appreciate someone on your team to work with to facilitate this.
Yeah, we can talk offline. I do have somebody in mind. It's going to be a timing issue, but let's talk offline. I think we have the expertise to help you out with that.
Okay.
Yay.
And, Barry, before we leave this topic, I think speaking as an individual, I just think I'm not looking to make any what I'll call drastic changes here. I'm just looking to kind of control it and phase something in over a period of time. But I know we have a number of employees on the meeting here, and I know a number probably watch this after. I'm really looking to put people on notice that will be joining us in particular, how it's going to work moving forward. And I also think with Mark's help, I need an interpretation of some of these department head contracts and at least the existing language in the CBAs, because I think that should be relevant to how someone thinks about this. We can't change something for an SAP employee, but then have a department head that's still going to get it because they have some old wording in their contracts. That's a much thornier issue, all of which is outside of our control. But I do think that at least will weigh into my own personal decision of where I vote on any language changes in fairness to everyone.
I appreciate that. And it's been a sort of continuing challenge for us, both on the compensation side, where most of our focus has been, but now so on benefits, on where we sort of fit in here among the various groups of employees, and trying to maintain some level of equity, even though, again, we have no control over what the other groups do, and there are limits to what we can do to bring that equity about. But it's certainly worth repeating that it's something we need to be aware of. We're not operating in a vacuum here, and people know what other people are getting, so we have to be aware of that. So thank you. Anything else you want to talk about on benefits before we move on?
No.
Okay. Well, again, thank you both for the time you put into this. I think it's to everyone's benefit. All right, so we have a number of proposed revision language changes to the SAP that we need to go through. And I thought we would go through them and, as appropriate, vote on each one. If we're not ready to vote, that's fine too, but the more we can sort of put to bed so we don't have to continually revisit them, I think the better. Most of these we've talked about, at least to some extent, already. And I'm not going to talk about changing Board of Selectmen to Select Board. We don't need to deal with that at all. All right, so starting again with 7A, the first paragraph, there are changes which are necessary because we synchronize annual increases. And this is sort of, in the first paragraph, it's the language is really catching up to that. So the proposed change would be to delete the words 1 year from the date of his/her last increase at the end of the first sentence, and substitute in that sentence the words on July 1, and then to add the sentence, employees hired between April 1 and June 30 will be eligible for a salary increase the July 1st following their 12-month anniversary.
Barry, it should say annually on July 1st. You left off annually. On that first sentence.
Okay, you're right. I'm sorry. It should say
That's okay.
annual.
It's for the record, so I just want to correct that.
Yeah. Any discussion of that? I think we've talked about it before, and I think everybody was on board with it. Okay, so I will move to amend the first paragraph of section 7A of the SAP by deleting the words 1 year from the date of his/her latest increase and substituting the words annually on July 1st at the end of the first sentence, and then adding a second sentence that reads, employees hired between April 1 and June 30 will be eligible for a salary increase to July 1st following their 12-month anniversary. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, take a roll call vote. Ms. Jazinski,
Aye.
Mr. Malinowski,
Aye.
the chair votes aye. So that is approved.
Are we just going to make a general approval on changing selectmen to the Board of Selectmen to Select Board?
Well,
If there's
that's
so
going to
many
be
of
done
them?
generally for all of the town
Okay.
bylaws, so we
perfect.
don't have to do it ourselves.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, skipping to what is now the third paragraph of section 7A. And I would make a motion to delete that paragraph in its entirety and replace it with the following. Unless specifically exempted by Personnel Board policy, requests for salary increases must be accompanied by a certification from an employee's manager that the employee's performance has been, quote, satisfactory, end quote, or better, and that a written employee performance appraisal on a form approved by the Personnel Board has been completed. The form of this certification will be prescribed by Personnel Board policy promulgated hereunder. Upon receiving such documentation, the Personnel Board shall have final review and approval of all adjustments.
Second.
Second, okay, take a roll call vote. Ms. Jazinski,
Aye.
Mr. Malinowski,
Aye.
Chair votes aye. So that is approved. Okay, moving then to what are now sections 7B and 7C. And again, we've talked about this, and I think there was consensus for this change at our last meeting, so I will make a motion to delete sections 7B and 7C in their entirety, replace them with the following section 7B. Special, non-continuous part-time employees and employees in Schedule D classification shall be eligible for consideration for salary increases upon the recommendation of the appropriate department manager or board and approval of the personnel board. And then, and then to renumber what is now section 7D as section 7C.
Second.
Take a roll call vote. Ms. Jazinski,
Aye.
Mr. Malinowski,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. So that's approved. Okay. We're not going to do anything on benefits now except paragraph 11B5. And we've talked about this for legal reasons. We need to take out the words other than for cause. Because we have to pay out the vacation regardless of the reason for someone leave. So I will move that we amend section 11, subsection 5 by the deletion of the words other than for cause.
Second.
Okay, we'll vote. Ms. Jazinski,
Aye.
Mr. Malinowski,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. That's approved. Okay, let's go to section 13A. And Vanessa, can you bring in Mr. Hagerty if he is there? Good morning, Jim.
Good morning.
Good morning. So the board will remember that we've had some discussion about sections A and B, and that there was language proposed at the last meeting by Mr. Purple and Mr. Ballantyne to make revisions to this in order to make sure that the taxpayers are protected against changes being made that might adversely affect the town budget. And I think we were generally amenable to that. We did recognize, however, that there might be issues with independent boards and who was going to approve what, and we tried to address that with the language that I think is in the SAP document that you have. Mr. Hagerty contacted me yesterday with his thoughts about that second piece of it, but also a further thought about section 13A specifically. And I believe he sent to members of the board his proposed language changes for those sections. And I will turn the floor over to you, Jim, to explain. Let's talk about 13A first, about what you're thinking is about the two changes you'd like to make to that language.
Yes, thank you. Excuse me. The first would change the period of time under consideration here from no longer than a month to 4 consecutive pay periods. It makes sense, first of us, for talking sense of pay periods versus months, because that's how our system works. And the second, from the clerk's perspective, we will definitely have a period where we'll have part-time employees working in excess of 20 hours a week when we come up to the presidential elections because of early voting and the mail-in stuff. That happened last year, and it's going to happen in 2024 as well. So this would satisfy us so we don't have to go through this moving ahead. The second piece of this is because, and by the way, from my perspective, the funding for this, for the pay piece of this would all be in the budget submitted and voted by the voters. So what I'd suggest on this is to add, because if something unforeseen happened and we had to have extra money, that money would come from the reserve fund approved by advisory committee, not from the selectmen side of the house. So I'd suggest that we change the second line there, make a change to say, or the advisory committee, and I could add one more change here to say, for reserve fund purposes, to add that word in there, okay? For reserve fund, I don't know, is funding the right word? Is that, it sounds funny to say that, but reserve fund, I'm not sure the third word to use there.
Would it be reserve funding purposes?
Yeah, there you go, reserve funding purposes, yep. And that's straightforward on that one. That's the main reasons why. And this does a couple of things. One, it certainly makes sense that you don't want to have somebody going rogue here and incurring full-time benefits for the town. And, I think these are a couple of minor tweaks that would make it work, protect all the interests involved.
Okay. And to be clear, because I'm not sure this is clear, but as I read the bylaw, a department manager cannot legally change someone from a part-time employee to a full-time employee with benefits without the approval of the personnel board. I think that's what section 13A says. 13A and B say that the last sentence says the employee will remain a part-time employee with no change in status. So a department head cannot, as I read the SAP, they can have them working how many hours they want. They cannot change them to a benefit eligible employee without the approval of the personnel board. Do people disagree with that?
Well, I do want to bring this up because the way the bylaw is currently written, if somebody were to work above 30 days, then an argument made that they are entitled to vacation, holiday, and potentially other full-time benefits.
They can only work, that's what I'm saying, they can only work more than 30 days with the approval of the personnel board. If they're doing it without the approval of the personnel board, they cannot get benefits.
Right,
That's
okay,
my reading of it.
so this just changes that period essentially from 30 days to 4 pay periods.
Correct.
And
And I just want to be clear, that's my reading of the SAP. That only the personnel board can change someone's status from part-time to full-time to
Agreed.
benefit eligible.
Agreed. So those are the changes that suggested the first paragraph A, and then paragraph B would just be to add the word or advisory committee for reserve fund, for reserve funding. Add that.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments on this?
I
I mean,
think we're
I guess
supposed
I
to
do-
be using
go
the
ahead.
reserve fund for overtime for employees. I don't think that was the purpose of the reserve fund. I actually have a problem with doing that. So that's, I disagree with some of these changes. Here's my thought on this. We just got this yesterday afternoon around 4 o'clock. I'm happy to take it into consideration, but I need some time to look at the long-term impacts these changes are going to have. I know Jim is saying it's minor, but does this impact any other department, or is this just about one employee in the town clerk's office? I mean, we don't know. We haven't looked at it. We just got this information, and I am not comfortable with voting this right now and not having some time to really take a look at the long-term impact. And there will be a long-term impact. So I appreciate Jim being here and giving us opinion on this, but I am not comfortable taking a vote on these changes right now. That's my opinion on it.
Okay. Jason?
My question is actually to Brian. I have two questions on this. One, I assume the 4 pay periods is easier from Kristen's perspective to process payroll, et cetera, or are you like, is there, I mean, it's really set 28 days versus 30 days, correct? Is that easier
Yeah,
for
no,
you?
that
You agree with
part
that?
I see is the easier part. I don't have
Okay.
a problem with that.
Okay.
And I told Jim that.
Okay.
So, yeah, I
All
agree.
right, so to the point on advisory reserve fund, Dorian, I agree with you. Reserve fund shouldn't be covering overtime. Fundamentally, I believe it's emergencies. But I could foresee a situation where the reserve fund is covering overtime due to an emergency. So I don't want to preclude anything from happening there. I guess my question to Brian is, if we just left this as finance director and ignored the change that Jim was asking for a second, how does any department head, regardless of whether they're an elected or appointed official, actually get access to funds to cover this unless it's within their own budget, right? So I could see like police or fire, it's a big enough budget, or DPW, that's a big enough budget that, right, if they had something like this for a non-CBA employee, they would probably find a way to cover it within their own means. But obviously, I'm sure the town clerk, as we know, runs a very lean budget, as does probably almost every department at the townhouse, i.e. what's budgeted is actually already filled by an employee. So unless you had a vacancy at some point during the year. So I'm trying to figure out how you would fund absent a reserve fund transfer any of this unless you wait till the end of the year, which I don't think is good judgment, because if you're the department head, you're over your budget, and then someone doesn't approve your budgetary transfer at the end of the year, you're kind of in you're gonna have a lot of issues. And I'm sure the town accountant really wouldn't like that either. So I'm trying to figure out, is there some other option other than what Jim has presented in your opinion, or what are your thoughts on that? Which then goes to Dorian's point of, let's then digest this and vote on it next meeting. But I wanted to get at least your thoughts out there now.
Yeah, I think, you're right. Most of the departments are very stringent. And I think, there are a couple departments a little different, maybe like library, town clerk. A couple other departments that have, Jim, I know, has part-time work. So he's got sometimes during the year where he's got a little more work demand and somewhere he has a little less. So that's not typical of like my department where I've got my employees working this set schedule the entire year. So it's a little more easier to, so if I was in that situation, I'd have a problem. I'd have to immediately go, there's not a lot of options. I'd have to go to advisory and get an immediate transfer and deal with it that way. I think the only other option I can think of, and I don't even know if this is a good option, but just would Jim maybe add some extra part-time hours to, as, of course, if he knows an election's coming up, does he add X amount of hours to just have them there available in case he needs them? I don't know.
I think I can relieve some of the concern here. If we had an emergency, something crazy happened, would have to go to advisory. But I think that's I don't ever foresee that happening. I mean, it'd have to be something really bizarre. My concern about this is that the way the article was written in the notes, in the proposal, is that I couldn't have anybody work, even if I had the money. And Brian's right, I will put money in the budget for these activities, planning to have somebody work more than 20 hours. But the way the bylaw was, what my intent behind this is to say, look, I'm going to have the money. I just want to be able to have the option to have people work up to 4 consecutive pay periods and not have to worry about benefits. I don't want to have to go to somebody to get permission to have the person work the 40 hours, 4 pay periods. That's my concern. That's really all I'm concerned about. I don't see us going to advisory because I should have the money in the budget. And that's it. And the way that was written in the public packet, I'd have to seek permission from the personnel director or the personnel board in order to do that. And it just doesn't make any sense.
So you could have someone work up to, under the current language, 1 month without getting approval from anybody, right? It's only if you're going to have them work more than that you
Right.
need the approval.
Yeah, and my thing is that if we just extend that to 4 pay periods, it's going to solve my problem because it's a certainty that I'm going to have people work at least every 4 years, most likely every 2 years for a month and a half. They're going to have to work more than 20 hours a week. It's a certainty given the crazy changes in voting rules.
So are you saying then on A, you would be okay with just changing the 1 month to 4 pay periods and leaving the other language about the advisory committee out?
Yes, yeah, I'd be okay with that.
Okay, so the only thing we'd be doing other than the changes we've already talked about, it would be to change 1 month to 4 pay periods.
Sure. And the way I read that is that as the appointing authority, it's my authority to have them work up to 4 pay periods, but it's my responsibility to find the money for it in my budget.
Right. And just keeping it on the narrow issue of changing 1 month to 4 pay periods, does anybody have an issue with that?
I do. How does that work with all the other departments? I mean, so we're going to allow any and all departments at any time of the year, anytime they want, if they want to increase their part-time employees to start working, we're going to give them up to 2 months to do that? I mean, what is the long-term impact of all the other departments if they decide to start doing this? What is?
No, it's not 2 months, it's 4 pay periods, and I may have.
Which is 2 months, it's 2 months. They get paid every 15 days, so it's
Okay.
pay periods, so it's 2 a month. So it's almost 2 months. Some months are longer than the others, but it's 2 months. How is that impacting all the other departments to just give a go ahead that it's not just a month now, you're not limited, now you can double that? How is that going to impact other departments? We're not talking just the town clerk office, and then we're not just talking elections here because we're not limiting it. So what are we doing here?
Okay, and I think we're going to end up putting this off both.
I'm just asking, I'm being devil's advocate because I understand the need for it. I get that. My concern is how it's going to impact every other department, not just the town clerk's office. So
let me ask Brian a question. How frequently is this provision used now with the 1 month? Do other departments have part-time employees working more than 20 hours? Does it happen commonly, or is it a rare occurrence? Or if you know off the top of your head.
No, it's pretty rare. I mean, most of the town departments, like I said, are more like, and Vanessa just said part-time dispatch. It's more like the bigger departments. So they would be able to absorb salary, fluctuations, which makes sense. They have a little more, I won't say, they have a little more flexibility, let's put it that way. So, but most town hall departments, they are what they are. So it's pretty rare. I don't think you'd be allowing the departments to do anything that they shouldn't be doing. I mean, they have a responsibility to live within their, their allocated appropriations. So that goes beyond you guys. That's what they have to do. So I don't think it risks that, in my opinion, at least.
But what if they do, Brian? So we're going to say we have 3 or 4 other departments that decide to do that. They don't have the money in their budget. So we're gonna go to the reserve fund to start paying salaries, excess salaries. We shouldn't be going to the reserve fund for salaries, for mismanagement of, or shortages for emergencies, yes. Over time for employees is not an emergency. So how do we rectify that? How do we fix that going forward?
Yeah.
I think we
Like
just
I
heard,
said, I think we need to look at this a little bit longer and not just jump the gun on. I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable. I understand the need for it. I hear what Jim is saying. I understand it completely, especially in for the election period. I get that. My concern is how it's going to impact the rest of the year. It's not just elections. We're essentially changing the SAP for one employee is what we're looking at doing here. Or two employees, what he has in his department. I think we need to take a closer look at that. So that's just my opinion.
so,
Yeah,
but
and
Jim,
sorry, go ahead, Jason.
sorry, but I was gonna say, Jim, just to clarify, you're actually now okay removing any reference to advisory.
Yes,
Okay, so then, Dorian, it brings it down right to the 30 days versus versus the pay cycles, right? So, I mean, Brian, if you really think that this only, I mean, I know we shouldn't vote on this today. I think we should get Dave's opinion too. But I would just offer that I think there's certainly a way to make this all work in that if we believe that there are certain employees that may need longer than the 1 month that exists in the current SAP, we can actually call out those positions and just say, for these two positions, we may in times of elections or, right, like basically specify the purpose, they may go up to the 4 pay cycles without notification. That way you have just cause, I think, for doing that, because you know that it's going to come unless the state changes election rules. It relieves the burden, I think Mr. Hegarty is looking to relieve, of notifying us every time he has an election that he's going to trip this rule. But at the same time, Dorian, I think that will control what you're looking to control outside of the town clerk's office. And then, Jim, I would just say, you're a good communicator. I think it'd still be helpful just as a personnel board member to know when you're doing this, just as an FYI, not that we need to vote, but just, I think it'll allow us to inform future changes to see if others are trying to do something similar or have a need to do something similar.
I would be comfortable with that change, Jason. That's a great suggestion. Again, I would need to see the verbiage before I would want to vote on that. So I would ask this board to put this off, even if we just wait till February 16th, so we can at least have a couple more days to take a look at this.
Yeah, I think that's fine, given your comments and the fact that Dave's not here. I'm perfectly comfortable putting section 13 off until the next meeting, at which point we will have, and I can do it, I'll put together a language along the lines of Jason's suggestion to have a special provision for employees in the town clerk's office working on election-related matters. So, and they would get the full 4 pay periods. And we can, would anyone have a problem then to make it consistent, instead of saying 1 month, say 2 pay periods, and then
that's not a
4
problem.
pay?
That's not a problem.
Okay, all right, I'll draft something for the next meeting on that. Okay. Jim, thank you for your suggestion and your input, and hopefully we can solve the problem.
thank you very much. Have a good day, folks.
Bye,
You
Jim.
too.
Bye. Bye.
Okay, moving to 16C, which we hadn't discussed before, but this would eliminate, and I don't mean to fire you, Dorianne, but this would eliminate the clerk position, which I think is a remnant of days past,
I'm fired. Yay.
and put in a vice chair, because I think it makes sense to have someone ready in the event that the chairperson is unavailable for any reason, and there not be the ambiguity about who's going to take over. So I would suggest deleting the word clerk from section 15C and replacing it with vice chair. Any discussion?
So moved.
Second,
Okay. Have a roll call vote, Ms. Jazinski,
Aye.
Mr. Malinowski,
aye.
and the chair votes aye, so that is approved. Okay, then we move to 16F. And again, we had discussion about this at the last meeting about what do we do about, because we never meet the 6-month requirement. So any discussion of this before I sort of make the motion? You have it in your packets, what it would read. Any discussion? Seeing none. Okay, so let me get the. All right, so I move to delete the words "not later than 6 months prior to annual town meeting" from the first sentence of section 16F of the SAP.
Second.
Take a roll call vote. Ms. Jazinski,
Aye.
Mr. Malinowski,
Aye.
Chair votes aye, that is approved. We go to section 18. So this, to make it, and again, is there any discussion about these changes before I make a motion?
Nope.
Being none. So I would move to delete the entire text of section 18 and replace it with the following. The salary administration plan may be amended in the same manner the town bylaws may be amended. However, no amendment to the plan shall be made until it has been presented and acted upon by the Personnel Board. The board of its own motion may propose an amendment to the plan. Is there a second?
Second.
If a roll call vote, Ms. Jazinski,
Aye.
Mr. Malinowski,
Aye.
chair votes aye. That is approved. Okay, we're going to hold off on adding a position to Schedule A. We already voted to increase Schedule F to the same level as Schedule C.
Can I ask a question on that? And it's a question from Mark. I know there was discussion about the Board of Health position, which I've obviously abstained from. Are there any other new positions in the budget that aren't in the SAP? Mainly thinking about the building inspector position.
So there was a request for a part-time inspector position in building. There is not a position that's set up for that right now. I don't think there's even anything in the part-time schedule, Ms. Hale. I don't think that there is.
That's my question is, where are we gonna have another senior IT specialist sort of issue where town meeting could potentially fund a position and you have really no ability to fill it unless we take action under, I forget what clause it is.
Yeah.
Until next time. Is that your intention with that position? Or
Well, the problem is that, so we had this discussion, I would just harken back to the conversation that we had about a deputy fire chief. And then Fire Chief Morrow came and we talked about doing that and setting that up so that if we look to do that in the future, and the board really didn't want to go down that road if we didn't intend to go down the road of actually doing it at that time. So here we are now. It's been proposed by the budget. Selectmen haven't taken a position yet. Building is one of the departments that they're meeting with on Tuesday night to get a sense of whether they'd want to move forward with that position. If they did, it'd be something that we need to, to put together fairly quickly and get, added into the SAP. But given where this board has been, until we know it's real, or it's going to be intended to be funded to be real, we haven't brought it forward. Could it be put together fairly quickly for this board to consider and then graded? Absolutely. But yes, that's a dangling thread right now.
Okay, and obviously our schedule, and I'd hate to have a special meeting just for something like that, but it's a two-step process. We need 2 meetings to do it, so.
We'll keep that in mind.
So I guess my question, Barry, though, should be for you and Dorianne is, let's just say Board of Selectmen decide to bring that forward to town meeting funds it. Is, at least as we're currently constituted, would we prefer that be in the SAP at the same time that they're going for the funding request? Or are we going to be okay hiring them under the exemption in the SAP subject to further future action by town meeting? Like where are you both at? Because you had that discussion prior to me joining, but I just think we should be clear to Mark and Vanessa is if we want that in the SAP, that they should get rolling, versus if we're okay with that exemption for 1 year, then obviously it takes a lot of pressure off of this.
Yeah, no, I think, speaking for myself, and I think this has been our policy, it's our strong preference to have it in the SAP and not have to go the other route. We did not enjoy what happened with the IT position and what we would have had to have done had there not been a special town meeting. So I think Mark is aware that we want to get this in the SAP if it can be done. Dorianne, I don't know if you have.
No, I agree with you, Barry. So I'm of the same mindset.
So Mark, I would think you should bring that to the next meeting, regardless, unless the board completely strikes it for some reason between now and then.
Well, I think we'll have a better understanding after the meeting on Tuesday night. And if the board decides they want to go forward, I think we can move fairly quickly. I don't think we're reinventing the wheel in terms of, a job description for a building inspector.
Okay, thank you for raising that, Jason. Anything else on changes to the SAP at this time? Okay, let's move on to item 4B. So this was raised, and I'll turn things over to Mr. Purple. But I was asked, I guess it was last week, if the board would consider a revision to its budget, and I guess naively thought budget done, etched in stone. But I'm told that may not be the case. But in any event, I will turn it over to Mr. Purple to explain his request.
So I will begin this and then I will turn this over to Ms. Hale. One of the things that we talked about as we entered into fiscal, finishing fiscal 22, entering into fiscal 23 is looking at where we put the employee training money. And there was a conversation amongst myself and Ms. Hale that, should that money reside in the selectmen's budget for some of the training, or should it remain with personnel board? And we had actually, looked at putting some of the training, and again, this is general training. This is training beyond simply selectmen's office. This is department head or all employee type of training. And we had actually looked at putting it in selectmen's budget, and then it seemed that it would be better suited to keep it with personnel board, and rather than just putting in selectmen's budget. So anything that is selectmen orientated, meaning for the 4 members of our department, then it is still in our budget, as it is with other departments. But if it's more of a general training, it would remain the purview of personnel board, which means that money that may not have been requested of you is now being requested of you. Ms. Hale is, for a number of years, at least the 9 I've been here, has been the champion of the training and has been, working with personnel board in order to make those things happen. So I'll let her speak to the specifics of the request.
Thank you. So we had identified the amount of about $7,000 when we did put this in the selectmen's budget, and that would cover 3 general categories. One would be doing a workshop for all our mid-level and administrative support staff on a DEI topic. Last summer, the managers did a 3-part workshop on unconscious bias by one of our facilitators that we've used many times in the past. It's been a goal of the selectmen to talk more about DEI issues in our workplace and our community. So that's something we want to deliver to our mid and lower level staff. Another area would be just doing something for the department heads on, leadership development, dealing with, pressure points and as it ties to supporting employees, performance evaluations and so forth, and other management related topics. The third category would be doing a discrimination prevention training for all our employees. That has been done every few years on the recommendation of the Mass Commission Against Discrimination. We have not done that, mostly to COVID, I would say. We have not done that since the summer of 2018. So I do feel that we're behind in that. And of course, we've had a fair number of employee turnover since then. So that's how we got to the amount of $7,000 to cover a number of those topics.
So to be clear, are you asking us to increase the budget by 4,000 from the 3,000 that it currently is to 7, or are you asking for an additional 7,000 on top of the 3 that's in the budget?
We're actually asking for the additional 7.
Okay. Discussion.
And you have hard quotes for each of those trainings, which is how you came up with the 7?
Correct, yes.
What were we going to use the 3 on, Barry and Dorian, when we have used it for some of that sort of stuff?
We have never sort of specified what particular training would happen. Usually Vanessa will come to us with a proposal on some specific type of training. The only time we requested training that I can recall was on how to do performance evaluations. That was something that we initiated because of our displeasure with what we were seeing and how they were being done. But
we also did an Excel class, and we also did we did 2 or 3 Excel classes, and then we did something else.
Last year,
but again, that was people coming to us and asking us to fund that. That's the way it's generally worked.
So we need to ask to increase our budget by 7,000, or we can't just ask for 4 because we already have 3 there. We only have a few months
don't
left.
want to speak for the personnel director, but I'll just chime in that yes, we could just go with the 7 in total, but that means less of the things that we'd like to do that we feel we're behind in delivering to employees. But I would like Mr. Purple to weigh in too.
Yeah, so not to speak for the assistant town administrator, but I agree with it. I think that, $7,000 is the total of the training that's being sought. If you've got 3 and you're not looking, there's nothing else that you see that you're looking to do, then I think that you're looking at an increase of 4.
I would also say that I always go to our insurance company first, who has a very strong loss control program and delivering employee training. That is generally at no cost to us or at a very minimal cost. So we always start there, just so the board knows.
So just so everyone's clear, you're saying the select board or Board of Selectmen's office, however it's phrased in your budget, has gone down by 7, right? In all the
Yes.
budget projections that Brian's been running. So we have 2 choices. We can either go up by 7 on our side, which would be net neutral to the town, which would make our budget go from 3 to 10 for employee development, or we can replace the 3 with 7, i.e. go up by 4, and there would be a reduction overall net across what you're projecting for the overall town department.
Correct.
All right, so I'm gonna move that we adjust the personnel board budget for line 53070 employee development from 3,000 to 7,000.
Second,
Okay, we will vote. Ms. Jazinski,
aye.
Mr. Malinowski,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. So we will do that. Now,
We're gonna
When-
get yelled at by the finance director because we just raised our budget.
We actually
That's
reduced.
the finance director is happy because it's it's an overall reduction of $3,000. I will say, I just want to echo, thank you for doing this, but I do want to echo what Ms. Hale said. Because we have the insurance company that we do for property, casualty, and liability insurance, they do have libraries of trainings. They do have trainers that are willing to come out for free. If we can line something up that works for topic and schedule, we absolutely will. And, we'll touch this, and the request will come to personnel board as little as possible. So the goal is, 7,000 is what the top end of what we could need. But if we can find another way to do it cheaper or even better free, we will.
okay, having made Mr. Valentine happy, which is always a goal of ours. When
Exactly.
I spoke with Mark and Vanessa about this, when they raised the issue with me, and as I said, my initial reaction was I thought budgets were done, couldn't be changed, and they suggested, well, I think Mark's words were they were etched in sand. I thought of something else, the salary survey. And I went back and looked, and I think all of you received or may have received from Betsy her sort of timeline on what we had done with salary surveys. And when we voted the budget, and I went back and looked at the minutes, the discussion was that it was not time for us to do a salary survey. But it turns out we commissioned the studies for Schedules A and C in the fourth quarter of 2017. Now, we're supposed to be doing these every 4 years. So as I look at her timeline, we're well past the time when we should have commissioned studies. And we talked about this, and we talked about, well, we've got 5,000 in this budget for the current fiscal year, and we have 5,000. But if we're going to be revisiting our budget, is there an appetite for seeing if we can get the funding to do full-blown studies for Schedules A and C? And before I open it up to what people think about that, I had asked Vanessa, and we had asked her as a board to get some quotes for what could be done with the money we had available. But I asked her to go back and see if we had more funding, what would it cost us to do that? So let me turn it over to Vanessa to get that information.
Sure. So we've talked to 2 consultants that we're familiar with over the past few days. These are not hard quotes. These are ballpark quotes because we didn't have, enough opportunity to do a firm scope of services. But I've described to them, what we've done in the past, what the board is interested in doing, and is there any opportunity, for someone on our staff or Mark or myself to kind of gather the salary information to bring down the cost of doing a full-fledged salary study. Since, we're talking to these managers in our comp communities all the time, we feel that, we can do that pretty quickly. The first quote is from GovHR, who has done the study before for Schedule A and C. She has said, I'll just, quickly summarize this, that if we gather the data and do the input into the salary spreadsheets with all the formulas that she would provide to us, that would definitely save a lot of time on her end. Then I think that would probably bring her cost down to about 12,000, between 12 and 13,000. And she would be doing an analysis of our job descriptions still actually reflecting what our employees are doing currently. She would look at, the comp ranges in other communities to make sure that we're still in the market rate. She would also review whether our positions are still classified in the appropriate grades. She is very familiar with our workplace and the SAP, of course. And she, of course, is the one that has provided to us the point factor system that we use when we are looking at adding positions like the nurse, et cetera. So the other consultant we spoke to was from UMass Boston. The Collins Center is the public policy arm of UMass Boston. I want to start by saying my husband is a consultant with this organization. So obviously I spoke to Barry about this and said, if you want me to avoid getting a quote from UMass, we can certainly do that. We agree we would at least get the information. Of course, he would not be in any way affiliated with a study that Southborough would do, but I just wanted to go on the record so the board knew that. So their quote is closer to 8,000. And again, they would provide their data spreadsheet for us. We would go and get all the information. They would do everything that I just described with GovHR. It's a little bit easier, I think, because if there needed to be any employee interviews, that's one question for the board. Do you want the consultant to interview either all employees or a subset of perhaps an employee in each classification? For GovHR, that would be a bit more money. Some of it, of course, would be done virtually, but she is not located within Massachusetts. UMass Boston employees, of course, are all local. So the other point I wanted to make with UMass Boston is she conveyed to me in our conversation that a grading tool would be provided to us to use in the future. So in the past, we have had the benefit of using the grading tool from GovHR, but it's been a proprietary document, so we have not published it and we have not discussed the details of the point factor system in public meetings. So that is the benefit of the UMass Boston system.
Did you say that the UMass Boston, the 8,000 would include employee interviews, or that would be an additional cost?
Let me take a quick look here. She doesn't call that out specifically, Mr. Rubenstein, but I can I believe that was included, but I will make a point to verify that with her today.
When we did the studies with GovHR, I don't recall, did they do employee interviews as part of that?
She did, yes. Not on Schedule C. There might have been some limited, conversations with Schedule C employees, but with Schedule A, there were thorough interviews.
So if I'm correct, then if we decided to go with the Collins Center, we probably don't have to do anything with our budget between what we have in this fiscal year and what we'll have next fiscal year. We'd have enough to cover that.
Correct. There's 2 points there. The personnel director and I this morning were reviewing how we would craft a contract, because we would have to phase the contract. One portion would be funded perhaps in this fiscal year, and the next phase would be funded in a separate fiscal year. So we need to work with the town accountant to make sure that's phrased appropriately. The other thing I wanted to mention is if the board did end up awarding a contract to UMass Boston, they're on the state bid list as a state agency, so we don't have to go through any procurement process.
Okay, did you get a quote? And two questions. One, how comfortable are you, since you're the one doing the work primarily, of providing either the Collins Center or GovHR with the data that they need? Obviously, there's a fair amount of time involved in collecting that information and inputting it. Are you comfortable that that's something that your department can do?
Yes, I am. You know, I get emails probably 2 or 3 times a day from other communities looking for, you know, the very same information. It might just be a quick question on, you know, what are you paying your facilities manager in this fiscal year? Some of it might be more extensive. There's also a large database through the Mass Municipal Human Resource Association where communities upload their fiscal year salaries, their min and their max ranges. So between that and, you know, making calls and inquiries to the personnel directors in other communities that we speak to on a regular basis, and I think that would work just fine. It might not be me doing every single piece of it. We certainly would look to Melanie and Katie to assist, and perhaps even bring on an intern over the summer, is something we'd like to pursue.
Okay, so it seems to me that we have a couple of options. We could do nothing and get it done within the budget we have, or we could take that money we had given to Brian and take it back, add an extra $3,000 to our budget, which would allow us the flexibility. At this point, I don't know that we have enough information to make a decision whether we want to go with GovHR or with the Collins Center. I mean, I personally don't know how I would decide that other than on cost. So putting an extra 3,000 in would give us the flexibility to make that decision at a later point. Or we could just say, nope, let's just stay with the 10 between the 2 years that we have and move forward. So with that, what do other people think about it?
Jason, you want to go or do you want me to go?
You go, and then I will certainly follow.
Question. Do we have to start it this year? Can we just start it? We would start it next year? We wouldn't start it now, correct? So, I mean,
Well,
so we're
keep in
looking at
mind-
tightening the budget. So I would say start it next year so that we don't take the money back from Brian, which he's probably already worked into his numbers. Start it in, you know, next,
Are you referring to FY '23 or '24?
I guess 23. Don't do it in 22, go to 23. We're not that far behind. We've worked this stuff so much. I don't see the harm in waiting 1 extra year and then moving it over the next 2 years. Or, I mean, it's not that much money, but if we've already given the money back to Brian, I kind of feel bad to take it back because he's probably already planned it for something else. So if there's not an absolute necessity to do that now, I don't see a problem with waiting an extra year for budget reasons and then split it with the next coming 2 years and finish it up, like start it towards the end of it and then finish it up in the beginning of it and pull it together. Does that make sense?
But I think, isn't that what so Dorian, we have 5,000 this year, right? We're in FY '22
Right.
that we have no intention of spending. So it's already been budgeted,
Allocated.
appropriated, and funded at town meeting.
But we've
So,
already given it back to.
no, we
Brian.
haven't.
No, we haven't.
No, we haven't.
No, next year.
Okay, I'm mixing up the years then. Okay, never mind. Okay, then I'm good. We're not gonna take it back from Brian.
I think the goal, so the only money you gave back to Brian is the money that we anticipated using for employee development and selectmen's budget, which was cut out of selectmen's budget. We cut 7 out of selectmen. You only increase yours by 4. Brian still got his $3,000 in the kitty, so he's still playing with house money. This is essentially allowing that work to begin, for the comp study to begin now.
Okay,
And obviously, the accountant is not going to approve a contract that you don't have the funding available for. So we need to put a contract together that has phases so that the first phase would cover the funding that's available now. Second phase would be subject to FY23 funding being available. So that,
Okay.
I think that's the structure we're looking at.
so that would be July 1st?
Correct.
Right.
After July 1st, yeah.
Okay, so, okay, I'm totally misunderstood then. Okay, I'm sorry. So Barry, yes, I agree with you. After
Jason,
all-
Well, I said
Jason, you
two
should have
different
gone
things,
first.
So I am not in favor of changing the budget beyond the motion we've already taken here today. I am strongly in favor of getting this started in FY22 with our 5,000 and finishing in FY23. Given we're talking about this under a budget item and we don't have two proposals in front of us, I'm going to reserve judgment on which path forward. All I would just say is I think we should have the proposals in front of us at a future meeting. And I think that there's negotiation that can occur if one is over our budget and one is under our budget that we can deal with at a later point in time. I think we should pick based on qualifications and then see if the price is right, as opposed to just trying to pick one because of a price and or arbitrarily changing a budget to accommodate the high proposal. And then if we ultimately choose the lower proposal on merit, let's go with that. But I think I would ask the chair to add this specific item, right? And to have two proposals at the future meeting, because I do have some thoughts that I don't think would be appropriate to talk about under the budget article here.
So
Okay.
I would only offer one comment, Mr. Malinowski, to your comments with regards to Collins Center. Collins Center is part of UMass. It's a state organization. They will essentially tell you, and I think Ms. Hales alluded to it, you don't have to bid. You don't have to do anything. This is our price to do the work. And it kind of is what it is. So in terms of using the word negotiation, I'm not sure where you were going with it.
I'm
but-
talking about the HR piece.
Yeah, okay.
What I understood was HR is greater than the 10,000 that we either have appropriated now or budgeted for next year. And if we
Understood.
were to go with them, Mr. Rubenstein was going to offer an amendment to our budget, is I think where he was going to go. Correct me if I'm wrong, Barry.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think we have to be clear on the fact that if we don't do anything with the budget, we may be effectively deciding that we're going with the Collins Center. Not saying differently, but I don't think we can just assume that GovHR is going to say, oh, you only have it 10,000, we'll do it for 10.
Yeah. Well, I
agree.
think that I talked with Ms. Hale about this for, I don't know, 3 minutes before the meeting this morning. We looked at something very quickly. There's an assumption in the pricing that our staff is going to do a certain amount of the work for them to get to the price. If Ms. Hale goes back and said, look, we're going to have $10,000, what would your product or what kind of work would be maybe a little bit more work, maybe shifting, to staff. And then you can have a true evaluation of, if you're looking at the $10,000 within the available funds, these are our options. And this is what it means in terms of what the consultant's going to do and what we're going to do.
But if it's at $10,000, don't we have to put the GovHR
I
out
was
to
just gonna
bid?
say that would
Has to
kick
go to
us up
bid.
into soliciting 3 separate quotes,
Right.
which
Yeah,
Collins
so you-
Center would be one of them.
Yeah. So you would need
But regardless.
one other quote.
Right.
And the problem is, and I don't think Ms. Hale touched on this, there used to be, half a dozen firms that did this work. There are fewer and fewer people that are actually doing this work now. So I can think of one other person off the top of my head, Ms. Hale's probably got more, that actually is still doing this type of work that you could contact, maybe 2, to get quotes, for this. So getting a quote isn't going to be hard, but it's the field of people doing this type of stuff is drying up a little bit.
And I did talk to some of those, on Friday, who told me, they're no longer doing this.
Right, but GovHR also gave us around 12, it could be 13 or more. So but once you hit that $10,000 threshold, you have to go to bid. So it elongates the process.
Well, then maybe you tell them we've got 9995. So, like I said, but I don't want to play fast and loose with, we're trying to find a way around the requirements, because it's easy enough for us to get a quote from somebody who either isn't available or, would give us another price to consider. So.
Yeah, and it may be we could find other quotes that are 10,000 or less.
Yeah.
And I think we're all on the same page that we don't have enough information at this point to make a decision on who we were going to go with. So the question is, are we comfortable that if we stay at 10, we will find somebody we're comfortable with doing it? And that may or may not be GovHR. It may be we put it out to bid and there are, some entities we've never dealt with, but we find them the most qualified, whatever, and we'll do it for 10,000. So,
I cannot sit here and vote to increase our budget $1 more right now. Right? If there are mechanisms that Dorian and I obviously have seen many times in our terms on the advisory committee, within town government, if we have a really compelling case of why we need more than what we have, there are ways to figure it out. But I don't think we have that right now, and we're not talking about tens of thousands of dollars that we're going to be looking for. I just am not in favor of going for a random appropriation to accommodate one potential bidder. I think there's ways to make it work if that bidder ends up being the right choice for the town.
Yeah, I'd rather not increase the budget on the taxpayers right now either. But can we hold this and vote and get some more information from Vanessa with the details of stuff?
If you're keeping your budget the same and you're not looking to increase that line item, then I don't know that there's a decision that needs to be made today.
But in order for us to know if we should do that, can we get more information for the February 16th meeting and take a look at that a little bit with a little bit more education as to what we're actually looking at and the cost of stuff versus just blindly saying, well, they might want a couple of extra thousand, let's vote it into the budget. I prefer not to handle it that way.
Sure. I think if Ms. Hale's got a little more time to try and reach out a little bit further on some of this, I think you can have more information for your next meeting.
Vanessa, does that work for you? Do you have time for that?
Yes.
And Brian's not going to spend that $3,000 in the interim.
Already
That's
gone.
the one constant we don't have to worry about.
And if I am comfortable that at the end of the day we decide the best entity to do the work, whether GovHR or someone else, is 12,000, or that there's a way to, and we decide to keep the budget where it is, that there would be a mechanism for us to get that funding that, changes my thinking somewhat. But it sounds like where we are is we're going to punt this to the next meeting, not make any decision on anything today. And certainly we're not in a position to do anything on selecting a vendor today. So we'll put it off and see where we are at that point. Is that the consensus?
Yes, I'd really like to see what Dave thinks too, so.
Yeah.
And Barry, to make you feel better, I think we have room within our current year existing budget, maybe not on the right line item, which there's a process to get that reallocated, to if we do find we need something. So
Okay.
actually appropriated funds, right? We haven't spent a penny other than what we authorized from Ms. Townsley at the last meeting.
Right.
It's helpful to me to have the expertise of two veteran advisory committee members because It's an area I don't have expertise in. It's one of the many.
But we know I don't like borrowing from line items where it's not appropriated for that item. So yes, there is a process and we will do that. We have to do it.
Hopefully we don't, but yes, it's
Yes.
there if we need it.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Okay, is there any other business to come before the committee? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, Ms. Jazinski,
Aye.
Mr. Malinowski,
aye.
the chair votes aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all
Yay.
Thank you.
very much. Appreciate
Bye,
it.
everyone. Have a good week.
Take care.